10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Before we talk about Y2K, I'd like to begin with the history of modern computers. In 1939, Hewlett-Packard is founded. David Packard and Bill Hewitt founded Hewlett-Packard in a garage in California. Their first product was the HP 200A audio oscillator, which rapidly becomes a popular piece of test equipment for engineers. Walt Disney Pictures ordered 8 of the 200B model. In 1966, Hewlett-Packard entered the general-purpose computer business with its HP 2115 for computation, offering computational power formerly only found in much larger computers. In 1971, the Kenback 1 was created, the first personal computer advertised for $750 in the Scientific American, designed by John V. Blankenbaker, using standard and medium-scale integrated circuits. The Kenback 1 relied on switches for inputs and lights for outputs for its 256-byte memory. In 1973, after only selling 40 machines, Kenback Corp. closed its doors. In 1976, Steve Wozniak, a young American computer electronics expert, designed the Apple I, a single-board computer for hobbyists. With an order of 50 assembled systems from Mountain View, California computer store, The Byte Shop, in hand, he and his best friend started a new company, naming it Apple Computer Incorporated. In all, about 200 boards were sold before Apple announced the follow-up on Apple II a year later as a ready-to-use computer for consumers, a model which millions sold. In 1977, the Apple II became an instant success when released in 1977 with its printed circuit motherboard, switching power supplies, keyboard, case assembly, manual, gamepads, AC power cord, and a casted tape with the computer game Breakout. When hooked up to a color television set, Apple II produced brilliant color graphics. In 1979, Atari introduces the Model 400 and 800. Shortly after delivering the Atari VCS game console, Atari designed the two microcomputers with game capabilities, the 400 model and 800 model. The two machines were built with the idea that the 400 would serve primarily as a game console and the 800 a home computer. Both sold well, though they had technical and marketing problems and faced strong competition from the Apple II. In 1981, IBM introduced its PC, igniting fast growth in the personal computer market. The first PC ran on a 4.7 MHz Intel 8088 microprocessor and used Microsoft MS-DOT operating system. And this was just the beginning of the ever-expanding revolution of computers, and leads up to Y2K. But what is Y2K, and what does it mean? Y2K was a problem for both digital, computer-related, and non-digital documentation and data storage situations, which resulted from the practice of abbreviating 4 digits for 2. For example, the year 1927 will be abbreviated to 27 to save space. But what made this so important? Let's find out. Firstly, the practice of representing the year with 2 digits becomes problematic with logical errors arising upon rollover from 99 to 2000. This would cause some date-related processing to operate incorrectly for dates and times after January 1st, 2000, and other critical dates which were build event horizons. Without corrective action, long working systems will break down when the 97, 98, 99, 00, the ascending number assumption suddenly became invalid. Secondly, some programmers misunderstood the rule that determines whether years are exactly divisible by 100 are leap years, and assuming the year 2000 would not be a leap year, although most years are divisible by 100 are not leap years. If they are divisible by 400, they are leap years. Thus, 2000 was a leap year. Companies and organizations worldwide checked, fixed, and upgraded their computer systems. The number of computer failures that occurred when the clocks rolled over to 2000 in spite of remedial work is unknown. But what was the need for this abbreviation? In the first half of the 20th century, well before the computer era, business data processing was done by using unit recording equipment and punched cards, most commonly the 80-column variety employed by IBM, which dominated the industry. Many tricks were used to squeeze the data into fixed 80-character records, saving 2 digits every date. In the 1960s, computer memory and mass storage were scarce and expensive. Early core memory cost $1 per bit. Popular commercial computers such as the IBM's 1401 shipped with as little as 2 kilobytes of memory. Programs often mimic card processing techniques. Commercial programming languages of the time, such as RPG, processing numbers in their character representation. Over time, punch cards were converted into magnetic tape and then disk files. But the structure of the data usually changed very little. Data is still input using these punch cards in the mid-1970s. Machine agricultures, programming languages, and application designs were evolving rapidly. Neither managers nor programmers of the time expected their programs to remain in use for many decades. Realization that the databases were a new type of programming with different characteristics had not yet come. There were exceptions, of course. The first person known publicly to address this situation was Bob Beamer, who had noticed the problem in 1958 as a result of working with a certain software. He spent the next 20 years trying to make programmers, IBM, US government, and the ISO aware of the problem, with little result. This included recommendation that the way they put the dates together should be used specifically for 4-digit dates. Despite the magazine articles and subjects from 1970 onward, the majority of programmers and managers only started recognizing Y2K was a looming problem in the mid-1990s. But even then, interior and compliance caused it to be mostly unresolved until the last few years of the decade. In 1989, Eric Nogum was instrumental in the assurance that Internet Mail used a 4-digit representation of years by including strong recommendation to this effect in the Internet host requirement documents. But what really happened on Y2K? Did anything at all happen? When the clock struck 12, very minor problems happened with such programs as Microsoft Excel, the C+ program, and very few like JavaScript. But these things were minor in comparison to what was expected to happen. So we got well off on Y2K. I guess the better question would be, what was supposed to happen? Running theory is that Y2K was the end of all computers. All computers would reset and crash, causing there to be no technologies. Planes would crash, bombs would fire, and modern civilization would come to an end. But how much did this all cost? All these problems needed to be fixed. So who paid for it, and how did it get done? The United States alone had spent $100 billion on Y2K fixes when the year 2000 dawned, and nothing extraordinary went wrong. Even though that was the plan, many wondered if money spent was worthwhile. Top US government and private sector technology experts say that the money was well spent. When nothing happened, they proved their point that the computer glitches were fixed. Commerce Department estimated that in November, that Y2K costs about $365 per person in the United States. That's a total of $100 billion by next year. President Clinton's top Y2K advisor, John Hoskins, said on January 3rd that what has been referred to as the Y2K bug has been squashed with regard to key infrastructure systems in the United States. But how were people reacting? Well, on the religious front, in the United States, some Christian groups utilize the millennium fears to support their beliefs. Most modern churches didn't give a statement for the year 2000 problem besides the warning to stay prepared. For the doom and gloom bunch, their message is clear. Get out of the city now or die. Y2K is inevitable. The civilized world will never exist again. No longer was there a question whether the bug could be fixed or not, but instead the focus on the consequences of complete failure of all computer systems. They urge everybody to be prepared. In their view, it's better to be prepared for the worst, even when it doesn't happen. They predicted that in 2000, the current social order will vanish after the meltdown of all important systems. So why does this matter to American history? Some would say this is a minor subject, but it is very important because it prepared us for the future. What implications would that hold? Where would we be without computers? We will never know, and that's because the important people, programmers, and other people of that nature, they prevented this potential catastrophe from happening. So what do you think? What would have happened if all computers crashed? What would life be like? What did you think of Y2K?
I was at home enjoying my evening and had my family over for New Year's Eve.
Were you affected by Y2K at all?
Well, none of my appliances were affected, so I don't really think I was affected much, and I didn't have a computer, so I was okay on that front.
So were you startled by the realization of that the world could actually end?
Well, I didn't really think much of it, because there have been tales of the world ending since the beginning of time.
What did you think of Y2K?
Well, I wasn't really aware of the situation until a couple months before the Y2K event.
So overall, do you think Y2K was important to history?
Well, I don't know. I was not very involved in the problem, but I think a lot of the government money was spent on fixing that problem.
Thank you.